and I've asked the Honourable Darren Hughes to fill that role. So I now call on Government Order the day number 3.
Criminal Investigations Bodily Samples Amendment Bill, Committee stage.
A point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I was wondering in the brief interregnum that you are filling if there was any particular ruling you would require us to require of you in order that you might be recorded on your Hansard as having made such a ruling. Regardless of what that ruling might be, I think we'd be prepared to support you in that. I suppose it's
Order. I'll ask the Honourable Minister to resume his seat. That is not a point of order. If he continues to trifle with the chair, there will be serious consequences for him. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Criminal Investigations Bodily Samples Amendment Bill.
Members, the House and Committee on the Criminal Investigations Bodily Samples Amendment Bill. Members, when the committee was last considering the bill, debate on Part 2 was about to commence. The question is that Part 2 stand part.
Mr Chair.
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr Chair, Part 2 implements the second stage of the Criminal Investigations Bodily Samples Amendment Bill by extending the provisions in Part 1 that apply to those adults suspected of committing a relevant offence to those suspected of committing any imprisonable offence. This part also makes the District Court the court to which applications under the Act are made, rather than the High Court, and provides for a mandatory retention period of 10 years for DNA profiles from adults who are convicted for imprisonable offences which are not relevant offences. This staged approach is to allow police time to develop guidelines and train staff, and will also assist environmental science and research to cater for the increased workload. As a result of the Select Committee's input, Part 2 of the bill has undergone 3 notable changes. I'd like to make some comments on those. The first one is that the range of offences for which it is possible to collect DNA from a young person will not be expanded to include all imprisonable offences as for adults. The new power, as it applies to young people, will only be available where the young person is suspected of a relevant offence, to ensure that only the most serious young offenders are subject to the new power. Secondly, the committee made a number of important amendments throughout Part 2 to include the relevant offences listed in the schedule of the Act. For example, peeping or peering is a relevant offence in the schedule but does not carry a sentence of imprisonment. As originally drafted, this meant that DNA sample could not have been collected from persons suspected of committing this offence under Part 2, but could under the first phase. The third point I wish to make, Mr Chair, is that a new definition of district court has been inserted to clarify that when judicial functions are transferred to the district court, they can equally be exercised by the youth court in cases where it has jurisdiction. In respect of Mr Cheval's amendment to require a review of the provisions in 5 years' time, members will be aware that, as expressed in the explanatory note of the Part 1 copy of the bill, the Ministry of Justice will review the entire Act by August 2011. That review will look at the broader operation of the Act and will include how the provisions are operating and whether they should be amended. That review will be completed before the second stage of the bill is implemented.
Call Charles Cheval.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. In the